I may not be a grown-up, but I know a few things. I know my dog's my best friend, and I know that Kevin McCurdy will always try to steal third. I see you, Kevin.
So we are already in session. We'll say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Williams, will you take roll, please?
Ms. Fowler?
Here.
Mr. Lane?
Here.
Dr. Roberts?
Present.
Ms. D. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Vowell?
Here.
Ms. S. Jones?
Present.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Good evening, everyone. We always start our meeting with the Spirit of Excellence Award, which is a time where we recognize the outstanding staff and students who are truly making an impact. Tonight, we are excited to honor the Collegiate School of Medicine and Bioscience on winning the top prize of $10,000 in the Worldwide Technologies Annual Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Student Forum Hackathon. This year's hackathon challenge was to design a program to help students through the lack of social interaction during the pandemic. The funds will be used to support the development and implementation of Collegiate's winning concept, a Microsoft Teams widget called Recess. Also of note, the district's Metro A&C High School received 4th place behind 2nd place finisher John Burroughs and 3rd place finisher Lindbergh High. Congratulations again to the collegiate students, their families, the school leadership team, and team coaches Alex Schenk and Monica Nikolai. This is the 2nd team they have led to a top finish in the hackathon. Collegiate's first win was in 2018. Thanks also to Worldwide Technology for their support of STEM education and for creating such a special opportunity for our students. With that, we'll move into approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the regular board meeting dated January 12th, 2021.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I make a motion that we approve the work session minutes dated January 26th, 2021.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I make a motion that we approve the board meeting minutes, regular board meeting minutes dated February 9th, 2021.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes, I'm sorry. We're having some difficulties on the video.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I don't know where I left off.
Thank you. On the ninth.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve the board meeting minutes from, or the work session minutes from February 23rd, 2021.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes?
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I make a motion that we approve the board meeting minutes from March 9th, 2021.
Second.
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes?
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell? Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So typically, this is the time when we would do public comment, so I will read our statement due to COVID. The Board of Education is committed to receiving public comments during the COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding suspension of in-person public Board of Education meetings. As part of this effort, the board is inviting interested members of the public to submit written comments to the following email address prior to the start of the board meeting: slpsinfo@slps.org. Subject to the requirements that commenters exercise proper decorum and respect for individual and student and employee privacy, the Board of Education will assemble the written comments and make them available for review by the public via a link that will be placed on the district website, alongside the link for viewing rebroadcasts of the board meeting. This procedure for submitting public comments will remain in effect until the Board of Education returns to normal in-person public meetings. Dr. Adams, I will turn it over to you.
Ms. Van Oy, we have a video that you can show at this point in time, please, and then I'll jump in right after the video.
I was on the board that passed the resolution of having in-school suspension in all our schools. You got behavior issues. We put you out for a week. Are you going to have more behavior issues when you come back, or less behavior issues when you come back? For the board gets met. Now, I'm going to leave it to the committee on the details of that, but I wanted to tell you just a step about where I think it will go, so you have a better idea of what we're going to try to do. Third grade reading levels. 40% of our kids all over the country are not using grade level by third grade. That's not going anywhere. And that's my signature issue. So they say about me, and I take the compliment, and people who work with me know this is true, that everything I say has a subject, a verb, and third grade reading scores. I want to believe that I have gifts as a public servant, and I don't believe God would have given me these gifts unless He wanted me to find a place to use them.
So on March 13th, I'm sorry. On March 31st, a former board member by the name of Bill Haas was no longer here. Bill Haas served 4 terms on the board, 1997 to 2005, 2010 to 2018. He was an advocate for students participate, particularly in the area of literacy. He understood that reading is a fundamental skill that impacts all learning, and his focus was on helping every child to succeed at or above the grade level. And so at this point in time, I've asked that the board and the public will bow their heads in a moment of solemn meditation for Bill Haas. Thank you. Comments are as follows. I'd like to encourage all SLPS stakeholders to save the date for the second part of our inaugural ABAR Anti-Bias, Anti-Racism Virtual Mini Conference on April the 24th. The event will feature Jason Reynolds, the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature and a New York Times bestselling author many times over, Additional details will be announced close to the time, and it's on our website as well. A few friendly reminders for families. We're still accepting applications for summer learning. If you're interested, you visit slps.org/summer for details to sign up. As of Sunday, we had 2,400 elementary students and approximately 200 middle and high school students. So obviously there's a lot of room available, and we want students to try to get back into the mode of being in person for instruction. We are also looking at a virtual option as well, but right now the focus is around in person. Options include credit recovery, academic enrichment, and support for ESOL students. Additionally, pre-K registrations started on Monday for the 21-22 school year. Registration will be by appointment only, obviously not honor social distancing from 8 to 2 at the district office. You can view the district website to request an appointment. Finally, we are also accepting enrollment requests for next school year for our new virtual learning program at Dunbar, grades K through 6. If you're interested, you go to slps.org/virtual academy for more information. At this point in time, one of 4 presentations will be provided. The first 2 presentations will be provided by Mrs. Banks, the monthly financial update, and then the 2021-22 final budget presentation.
Good evening. So this is our regular monthly update. This is for March year to date. Here are our regular financial objectives with the update for the fund balance policy as noted, which a COVID update this month, which I'm sure everyone is aware of the American Rescue Plan Act and the allocation. We estimate it will be approximately $100 million. Again, this is only an estimate. The federal government has already allocated or sent 2/3 of the allocations to the states. So we anticipate receiving some indication within 60 days. I've highlighted really 5 of the high leverage items that will be eligible under what we're calling our ESSER 3 plan. Of course, we also have our $46 million in our ESSER 2 plans, of which we have budgeted $20 million for fiscal year 22. We obviously have much planning to do with all of these additional funds. The CARES update for our original ESSER 1 funds, or the $10.7 million, we've spent approximately $6 million, or 56% of those funds to date. We plan to spend the remainder for technology purposes as presented at the last board meeting, and some remaining personal protective equipment. We had a strong month in March for tax revenue and also some large title reimbursements. I know there were some questions about revenue timing. This was actually our first title reimbursement due to some delays in budget approval and so forth. From an expenditure standpoint, we again have listed some of the larger expenditures for March, and you'll note that something new includes the bond principal and interest payments. The March revenue for all funds, approximately $25.7 million in March, $310 million year to date, or 77% of the revenue budget. You'll note the strong tax revenue under local revenue and the Title I revenue under federal. Here are the March expenditures for all funds. We spent approximately $58 million, $257 million year to date, or 63% of the expenditure budget. You'll note the $28 million in long and short-term debt for the principal and interest payments, and that's nearly 50% of the expenditures for the month. The other bond interest payments occur in September. Financials obviously continue to look very strong, particularly with the addition of the American Rescue Plan funds. And next, we'll be moving on to the 22 presentation if there are no questions right now.
I have a couple questions. On the bond principal and interest, are they paid just once a year or twice a year?
Twice a year,
okay.
yes.
Okay. And then on the revenue, if we get it after the fiscal year, will you guys add that to the current fiscal year, even though the receipts come after the fiscal year, or are you planning to get it before this fiscal year ends?
Well, some of our revenues for fiscal year 21, we may not receive until as late as October, but they will be considered 21 revenue.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, Ms. Banks. Thanks for
I'm sorry, I had one more question,
Okay.
which I know I asked several times. With the CARES dollars, is there any way that we could get shields for our teachers and the desk at the schools for the kids when they come back, so that there'll be more protection?
Yes, and I know that we have ordered some of those desk shields before. I believe there are some in the warehouse and they were to be delivered, but absolutely those are eligible and we can certainly order some of those.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Fowler, I did check with the team when you sent the email. So the numbers I have right now, 3,800 have already been being utilized at this point in time. But obviously, as we get prepared for next school year, we will be purchasing more.
Thank you, Ms. Banks, for the report. This question is, however, is for Dr. Adams. It's regarding the ESSER funds. And my question centers around, are we going to identify some overarching goals that we connect to those ESSER fundings versus just identifying a list of things that we can expend the money on? And an example being, and I think Regina mentioned it, safely reopening schools for all students.
So July 1st is my target date to come back to the board with what we will be recommending. We will be involving principals, teachers, parents, and the community in making recommendations. I met with my staff today to start that process, but yes, I'll be coming back to the board either in June or July with a recommendation about what we're looking at over the next 3 years.
And will we include the community input around?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We will do that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now on to the fiscal year 2022 proposed budget. Now, much of this presentation is a review of what we've been talking about for the last several months, so I will go at a very high level. With the exception of the first item, where we'll overview the federal investment in K-12 public education as a result of COVID-19. Then we'll review the 22 budget process, the budget highlights, and go into any questions. So this slide really demonstrates the unparalleled investment in the federal government has made into public K-12 education very quickly. Starting with the CARES Act, which the federal government appropriated $13.2 billion to K-12 education, of which our St. Louis Public Schools received the $10.7 million, and that's what we have been reporting on monthly and intend to spend down this fiscal year. The federal government appropriated $54.3 billion in coronavirus response funds. We're calling that ESSER 2, which our share is $46 million, of which we have budgeted $20 million for fiscal year 2022. Obviously, this was before we knew about ESSER 3 and the amount, so we will likely, almost certainly, be coming back to the board to spend more than the $20 million in the ESSER 2 funds. There's also $7.2 billion in E-rate funding by the federal government, which we don't know exactly how those funds will be allocated or what we might receive. And the $125.4 billion in additional K-12 funding, which is considered the American Rescue Plan Act. This is where we're estimating that we will receive $100 million. So in total, the federal government has appropriated over $200 billion, and St. Louis Public Schools anticipates over $156 million. And as noted, Dr. Adams will be coming forth with an action plan by July 1st. Kind of as a point of reference, this is a graph that I displayed last year on our major funds and kind of how we received those funds during the Great Recession during the 2008 time period. Now I've updated this graphic through fiscal year 22. So since 2007, the tax revenue has continued to increase, and that's the blue line. State aid has continued to decrease, which I think that's purple. Sales taxes have remained fairly flat with some smaller reductions during these last couple years. But the federal funds, which are in yellow, you can see how much was received really during the Great Recession period, the big uptick, and we certainly anticipate that when we consider the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds through fiscal year 24, that it will surpass the funding of the Great Recession funding, stimulus funding. So these are the high-level steps of the budget process pretty much every year, starting with the strategic alignment to the transformation plan. We did make several adjustments this year, and some of these steps, whether it was due to the pandemic or due to consolidation considerations, really to speed up the process. We're now obviously at the place where we're asking for approval of the fiscal year 22 budget, and we typically don't have budget approval until the June timeframe. We marketed heavily through the website, social media, newsletters, principal messages, and an ad in the American. We offered 3 budget forums where fewer than 20 watched live. Over the course of the 3 forums, we had 8 questions asked on chat. They were answered and or posted, and no other feedback through any of the other areas. We posted the videos, and the first meeting was viewed by 66, the second meeting by 54, and the third meeting had 100 views. These were the original fiscal year 2022 revenue assumptions, which have not changed very much other than some of the percentages for the general operating budget, or GOB, since we've had some additional revenue to compare with. Some of those percentages have changes, but overall, the budgets are really, the revenue budget categories are the same. The stated fiscal year 2022 payroll initiatives discussed, they have not changed, including the net staff additions of $4 million, plus the $5.3 million for the 3% salary increase. However, the virtual school, I believe, is now a K-6 school versus a K-8 school, and the trade staff will not move to 12-month status effective July 1. So there's still some consideration for that. We have over $5.25 million of GOB non-payroll initiatives as stated. We did increase the elementary school discretionary per pupil allocation. So that increased from $450 to about $700,000. All else remains the same. The $9.8 million of local grant funding, that remains the same, as does the federal and state grants. However, as mentioned, we do anticipate budgeting additional ESSER II funds beyond the $20 million that's included in the fiscal year 22 budget at this time. So there'll be more come back. No changes to the debt service fund, but again, the consideration of next steps and timing for a bond issue and/or refinancing. So the fiscal year 2022 budget totals by fund category did not change. However, some of the detail budgets did change, and everyone should have a copy of the 33-page detailed budget. The fiscal year 2021 comparison budgets were updated to include more updated information, obviously. So you'll see some changes to the year-over-year dollar and percentages on this slide. So in summary, we're seeking approval for a $440.7 million revenue budget and a $395.5 million expenditure budget. And before I end and take questions, I thought it was important to show the updated general operating budget 5-year plan and speak to why the fund balance is so important, which the general operating budget is where the majority of the fund balance lies. You'll note the bottom 2 rows. One is the surplus or deficit, and one is the ending fund balance. So you'll note beginning in fiscal year 2022, there is a deficit of about $15 million in red. It's one of the bottom two lines. And going forward throughout the rest of this 5-year plan. So obviously, we want to make sure that we're using the stimulus funds to support our students the best we can. We really have an opportunity to revision how we support students. And the intent would be to do so and maintain the integrity of the fund balance. So we really look forward to developing that plan with you, with the community, with the staff and the teachers and other stakeholders. And I want to publicly just thank the finance team for the hard work in putting together this budget. And at this time, I'll take any questions that you might have.
A few questions. On the ESSER funds, is it an absolute requirement that we spend the money by those dates, or could we get no-cost extensions on those? And the reason I ask is that, I would hate to see us spend money just because we have to versus, sometimes I know the federal government will allow no-cost extensions. Is that a possibility at all? And that way we can carry some of that money into years?
Well, all I can really go by are the stated deadlines at this point. I know that with some of our other funds that are entitlement funds like Title, where we have carryover and things like that. So depending on how these funds are spent, I guess, in their entirety, there could be some other considerations, but I'm sure we won't know that until time moves on.
Then on building sales, I see that you put those funds in general operating budget. Why don't we put it in the capital budget?
Well, there is a capital component of the general operating budget. So it's in a capital fund within JOB.
And then the last question I have is regarding the grants. I see that the local grants, one is 7.7 million, looks like from the Public School Foundation. And then the spending of that amount is 9.7 million. What is that? Because those amounts went up, pretty, those are pretty large amounts. And I was just trying to find out what we're going to be doing different. Yeah, the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation is giving 7.7 million. That seems to be a huge amount. And then what are we using those funds for?
Yes, there are, I think, about 12 different local grants. And I know that within the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation, that there are some Jack Taylor funds for early childhood education that we plan to spend some of those funds in fiscal year 2022. It might be about $3.5 million. There are also some other grants within the foundation that really carry over from year to year. I know that their focus with some of the high school and career readiness, there are some grants in that area. And I'd have to pull out that information to remember what the other ones are.
Okay, and that you could do that later. And then finally, on the food service, where the increase is that mainly because of the increase in federal grant funds, where the food service dollars are going up?
We're anticipating, and we're certainly planning to be using the National School Lunch Program that would have more funding available versus the summer program that we're using in the current year. So that's the reason for that big change.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Banks, as a follow-up to Regina's question, the timeline for the ESSER dollars is September 2023 or possibly September 2024 to expend the dollars.
Well, we have on the different appropriations, of course, the ESSER 1 funds, the $10.7 million is September of 22. The ESSER 2 funds funds, which is the $46 million, is September of '23. And the most recent funds, which we're anticipating $100 million, is September of '24. So they each have separate kind of deadlines.
Thank you.
Ms. Banks, on slide 8, you talked about the virtual K-8 program only being K-6 now. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I know there's been conversation about the availability of staff for the K-8. In the middle school, it requires more staff for middle school to accommodate the different subjects. And unless we have adequate enrollment, it would be difficult to have appropriate staff. So I think that's why we're looking at K-6.
That is correct. At this point in time, we only have a handful of students who made an attempt to register. So we are taking information from them, and we also have an amendum program possibly for the middle and high school students, but the numbers are really, really low right now, Mr. Lang. We are asking parents who are interested in the middle school component to send us an email of interest, and based on the numbers, we may make some adjustment. But at this point in time, it is K-6.
Okay. So I do understand that Edmentum is completely different from the virtual option. Edmentum is very different from the virtual option that we're presenting. And I know that with the virtual K-8 program being in that list of 10, I call them promises that we made to people in consideration of the closure and consolidation. I would just hate, I understand adjustments are made in numbers, but I would hate to seem like we were reneging on that commitment.
Yes, so again, we are taking the information. We want to see what the numbers are. I think I got an email from another board member that asked what would happen if the numbers don't come in, and obviously we will make some adjustment. If the numbers go up, we'll obviously make an adjustment as well. So we are mindful of that, but at this point in time, 1 week into the advertisement, I think we have about 25 students who have indicated that they want to do virtual right now. That may change, Mr. Lang, but if we need to come back and make an adjustment, we'll do so.
The dollars in the budget, though, are based on K-8, though, just in case.
They are.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. HR, Human Resources presentation is next. Mrs. Westland.
Oh, I see. Good evening. I'm here to give you the Human Resources Recruitment Update. I'm going to start with some context, share some data about where we are, and then talk through our strategic priorities. So if you've been here, you've probably seen this data from me before. We're in a teaching shortage. We don't have enough teachers nationally or locally. That's compounded by the fact that in Missouri, our teaching workforce does not represent our students' backgrounds or our community. Compounding this further is that DESE has noted a decline in certifications issued since the pandemic began. So this is where we remain facing a teacher shortage. This next slide will give you some context around our current reality in terms of teacher hires and teacher separations. The first 3 columns show you historical data, and the 4th column shows you year-to-date data, the top being our hires and the bottom being separations. As we drill down into school-based vacancies, you'll see similar snapshot data. The first 3 columns give you a snapshot of how many vacancies we had essentially on the first day of school for the last 3 years. And then the fourth column is how many vacancies we have today. These are not cumulative, these are snapshot numbers. So if we drill into where we are today, we actually see that we are in a better position than we've been in the last 3 years. Typically, we would see our vacancies increase as the year progresses. We've actually filled more vacancies. So currently, I want to talk about that 59 number. We have 59 teacher vacancies, and that represents current year vacancies and next year's vacancies. So if we know somebody has resigned effective the end of this year, that's reflected in that number. So this is a very encouraging number for us, the lowest our vacancy count has ever been. We currently have 1,622 teachers working, which means 96.5% of our classrooms are filled with a certified teacher. The other thing I want to call out is our separation data. So you have data that shows where we are compared to the last 3 years. Essentially, we have seen fewer separations this year. We don't know what the rest of the year will bring, but we thought it important to call that out. So right now, we're trending at 62.3% of the number of separations we've seen in the last 3 years this year, which essentially means fewer people have left us this year than at comparable times in the past 3 years. So I'm going to pivot into the recruitment team's strategic priorities. Some of these over the last several years, some over the last year. One of our biggest priorities has been around building and expanding sponsored pipelines. When I say pipelines, I mean essentially partnerships we build where we pay a partner to certify individuals to become SLPS teachers for us. This has been a huge focus over the last 4 years for my team, and there's several reasons we do this. But essentially, it's in response to that first slide I shared, which is that we have a teacher shortage. And so we are building our own supply of teachers to make sure that we have teachers who represent our students' backgrounds, teachers in hard-to-fill schools, teachers in hard-to-fill subject areas, and enough teachers in all of those areas. Another reason we're investing in pipelines is because of retention. Our data is young, but we see very promising results in the retention of teachers coming through our pipelines. We also, because we are the ones designing, creating, and paying for these pipelines, are able to align them with our strategy, which means our pipelines are specifically able to support our high-need schools. And lastly, our pipeline strategy is really premised upon building a portfolio and not having a singular option for folks who want to get certified. Most of this is made possible through Parsons Blewett, so I want to thank them in this setting as well. So this slide will show you several of our current partners, a previous partner of university instructors who used to provide tutoring for us for employees who couldn't pass their licensure exams. We're no longer partnering, and a future potential partnership with Bloomboard, with whom we are discussing what a micro-credential certification route could look like. The rest on that screen are current partners who certify individuals for us. To get really concrete about the benefits of pipelines, I want to share this slide, which specifically talks about just this year's pipeline teachers. So this year alone, in August of 2020, we hired a cohort of teachers through our pipelines. There were 46 teachers, and these are descriptors of who this cohort is. 2/3 are teachers of color, 1/3 are male, 98% are in hard-to-fill areas, 1/3 are in middle school placements, 87% are in what we call equity placements, which are essentially targeted, comprehensive, and SIG schools. 26% are in math and science placements, and 20% are in SPED placements. So I share this because I want you to see that we are fundamentally shaping our teacher workforce because we're able to design these pipelines. And 46 teachers this year was 24% of our newly hired teachers, which means about 1 in 4 of our new teachers this year came through this intentional design. So we are intentionally building systems and infrastructure to make sure that all children will have certified teachers in all grade levels, in all subjects, in all schools, in 5 years, in 10 years, no matter what the state of the Missouri or national teaching landscape is. I'll be briefer on the next priorities. So our second big priority is around ensuring equitable access to talent. This is our fourth year of something called our pre-hire cohort. This is essentially priority access to talent for schools that are targeted, comprehensive, or SIG, or the predecessor of those labels from the state. Schools in those categories get first access to all of our candidates. They get first access to all of those pipeline candidates I just described. They also get administrative support from my team so that principals are spending less time scheduling interviews and more time face-to-face over Zoom with candidates. The last thing we offer this group is the ability to hire 3 or 4 teachers before they have real vacancies. So the use case there is it's February. None of my teachers have resigned for the next year. I find a great teacher. I can hire them today. And when a teacher falls off of my roster in May, June, July, our next priority is around the candidate experience. And so we implemented a new applicant tracking system called Nimble to streamline essentially the whole process from application to interviewing to onboarding and hiring. My team screens all candidates within 24 to 48 hours, so there's no candidate kind of sitting waiting for an update. The first human that a candidate interacts with over video or over the phone is actually an SLPS teacher leader. And so the first human connection actually is with somebody who could be a peer. And then we do a lot of strategic cultivation of relationship between school leaders and candidates. The next priority dovetails with this priority, and it's the school leader experience. So my team works really hard to ensure that school leaders are able to be the talent leaders in their building. And the bottom line here is that we continue to ensure that school leaders are the ones making decisions around who is working in their building as much as possible. And we have streamlined communication again through Nimble. And so there is now a complete audit trail, complete communication trail through Nimble that has essentially cut out the need for principals to be wondering about the status of a candidate. They can see it all in real time at the same time my team sees it. We continue to focus on retention. Our school leaders continue to have stay conversations with their high-performing teachers. You all know about the improvements to our compensation package that were recently approved. We see that as a contributing factor to some retention levers. In the fall, we plan to continue our panorama culture and climate surveying so that we have data about what's working and what's not working for our employees and students. And my team will continue exit surveys as folks leave to figure out why folks are leaving and what we can adjust. The final priority is somewhat new, and hopefully with the board's approval, we will be able to launch a supplemental substitute contract. So essentially, we're going to continue much of our current substitute infrastructure, but we need more support to manage absences that arise daily, long-term leaves, et cetera. And so we are hopeful that we will be able to launch that this fall. I will take any questions.
Yes, I have a question. I'd like to know what are the hardest areas to fill?
From a subject standpoint, middle school science, middle school math, sometimes vocal music, and sometimes special education.
I have a question too. Teach for America, how long do those teachers actually, how long is their contract to teach for the schools?
So Teach for America core members commit to 2 years.
Okay. And then after the 2 years, how many tend to stay on with the schools and maybe get their certification?
So they're all initially certified. So there's kind of a difference between temporary provisional.
Okay.
And I don't have a perfect number, but I can follow up with that.
So the certification they get, they'll be able to continue to teach as permanent teachers, or is it provisional?
So for Teach for America, they come in typically on a provisional or a temporary license, and they get their full license typically within 2 years.
Okay.
That's consistent with the rest of our pipelines. It's just an alternative approach.
Do you know how many of these alternative pipelines then produce teachers that stay on for the long haul after the initial time?
Sure. So we're only in about our 3rd year of all of these. I can tell you our retention in these pipelines is significantly higher than when compared to the average first year coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question about the supplemental provider. Is that a Kelly Girl firm or something like that that recruits teachers, screens them, candidates?
Yes, it's a staffing agency specifically for substitutes.
And that is an item the board, I think, is approving at this meeting or the next meeting.
Can you talk a little more about how you're evaluating the teacher pipelines? I know it's pretty new, but what are the metrics that you're looking at and how are you tracking? Retention sounds like it's doing well, but what else are you looking at?
Sure. So our main indicator right now is around retention and school leader satisfaction. Our kind of MO is if school leaders want our candidates, then we're doing something right. And so if we have unplaced candidates, that's an indication to us. Eventually, we would like to map against evaluation scores and student level data. Unfortunately, between the pandemic and the timeline here, we don't have that yet.
I have a question. I'd like to know, do you have an effort in place where you're reaching out to our seniors here in SLPS who might be interested in becoming teachers?
So we have had a lot of discussions about that, and it is one of the long-term strategic priorities. When we had to decide initially where are we going to start, we started with folks who already had a bachelor's degree because we were going to be able to get them certified the same year. Whereas starting with a high school student, you're looking at a 4 to 6 year trajectory. And unfortunately, because of the shortage, we had to do some short-term work, but that is absolutely a long-term priority.
What kind of work do you do to maybe take substitute teachers who are not fully certified or, may have a 2-year degree to transition to them into full teacher positions?
Sure, I should have led with that. So a huge part of our pipelines is recruiting our loyal internal non-certificated staff. And so the UMSL pipeline that I kind of briefly teed up is almost entirely internal candidates who have worked as substitutes, TAs, ICAs, et cetera, and want to be teachers for us. We think that that leads to some of that retention success as well, because folks are already in our schools, familiar with our community, et cetera.
My question goes back to slide 9. So I think it would be helpful for the board just to understand the disaggregated data around the first 2 items. So with teachers of color, of course, that's pretty broad, and we're very aware of the demographic makeup of our district being overwhelmingly Black. So thinking about, it's great to see that we're advancing in these areas, but thinking about what that looks like for the specific demographic breakdowns of this of color category would be helpful. And then also with male teachers, I think that's a great place to disaggregate that as well and provide that longitudinal data as we continue to expand this out of, yes, we have male teachers, but how many of those are Black male teachers, knowing that that is a huge makeup of our district, and especially our, I would say, the most marginalized students in our district and city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. this is a kind of tag team. I'm going to do the first couple of slides, and then obviously Mr. Watson, as well as the lab team, is going to come to give the board an update. I want to go quickly to what we discussed last week. The board asked us to come back with some additional information about CSMB. On your table is a survey, a relocation survey that was provided to the CSMB families around the end of February, early March. There were 135 families who responded to the survey. And you can see where the zip codes were for those particular families. On the second page, you can see the graduation year of families who did respond, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and multiple years selected. You also see the attributes of the ranking that they did. Concerns of the current physical space in 135 represents approximately 45 to 48% of the families who responded to the survey. The concerns of the current physical space that students were in, you can see that the words that jump out means that there were a lot of responses in those areas, but those are the words that were said in that space. And in terms of the best quality of the current physical space. Then you can see the concerns of the current physical space on the next slide, next page, which is 4. And you can see that space was a concern, lack, concerns regarding gym, labs, science staffs, ideal new locations, and what would be the things that jumped out there. Location, space, students, labs, again, the big words. And so this survey was done again to gain some information for families to help us determine what they were looking for. I want to be clear that we never indicated at any point in time, at this point in time that this survey was done, that we were looking at moving. This was to gain information so we would prepare for the next step. And so I just want to share with the board that 3 or 4 things have occurred. The survey did take place. I met with the faculty last week and obviously did a executive board meeting by Zoom, Microsoft Teams Zoom, with parents last night. There were approximately 40, 45 parents who were listening, plus the executive board also asked me questions such that everybody could listen. There has been a document sent from students. I think there are about 300 or 200 responses for students in terms of their feelings relative to that. I've looked at all of that data as well. And so my recommendation is what you see before you hear, and because the board asked me to come back. And we also had advisory board walk through the school on Saturday. We spent about an hour, hour and a half, about an hour. They stayed a little bit longer than I did in the building to look at every single room, every single space. And we put out an RFP for the kinds of moves that we are recommending here. So I'll kind of walk through what my recommendation is, and I'll turn it over to the facility team and then come back to answer any kind of questions. The idea is to move the science labs, furniture, and equipment from Northwest Beaumont to CSMB, that says and CSMB, but to CSMB, to remove the portable classrooms and return to the vendor, William Scotsman. The cost is about $75,000 a year. The intent is that CSMB will have 4 science labs similar to what they have now in the portables. Cleveland currently has 1, and we'll move 3 into the building. The 3 ones will be converted to science labs with labs from closed schools, which I've already stated where they're coming from. Nahid Chapman Academy will be second in terms of relocating it to the Wyman site. The CSMB building is really the Wyman building. CSMB is the title of the school that's there. We have some information from the international agency that indicates that we expect that there will be a minor, unaccompanied minors who will be coming to the country, as you've been watching the news. And so in the fall semester of 2021, we expect an uptick in numbers. And we want to have the Nahid Chapman building closed because the building that they're in, which is called Gallaudet, that large building has a lot of challenges around windows and those kinds of things. And so we will close that building and move the Nahid Chapman to the Wyman site such that we could accommodate likely more families coming. And so as it relates to CSMB, I'm cognizant of the families' concerns, students' concerns. They feel that it was kind of sprung on them. We did not obviously provide any information until after schools had closed. Didn't want to mix this up with school closing because we're not closing CSMB. We are simply moving it to a place that we think will have more space and labs and gyms, some of the kinds of things that we got from the survey. And that is one of the reasons why we looked at this as a possibility as it relates to that. And this is the only school, quite frankly, that we did this kind of survey with some assistance from the advisory board. And that's information that helped guide us in terms of looking at this as a recommendation. I know the board has been inundated with questions around the move and what's going to happen and all of those kinds of things. But even with everything that I've heard last night and also from the faculty, I feel very, very comfortable that we can accommodate the move taking place and obviously support the kinds of things that this particular school needs to have. So I would advocate strongly for the board to make a recommendation to do so. Obviously, as I said, I'll come back and take any questions relative to that. Second question that came about Beaumont. Beaumont Technical Center right now is what it's called. There are only about 110 students in that building that we are accommodating. And over the last 3 years, as I looked at the numbers that are sent to the board, the average is about 125. Every year we have about 250 who say they're going and only about 125 actually show up. The challenge here is that students are there in a half-day program. And so they don't want to necessarily leave their school to go there in the morning or the afternoon, which makes it problematic for Beaumont Technical Center. Great equipment. We think some great things are there. But so we're looking to move the culinary kitchen at Beaumont to Gateway STEM on the third floor above the cafeteria at Gateway, and the cosmetology program we're looking to move to Vashon. These were some of the recommendations. When we're looking to close schools, this will increase the number of CTE programs and programs available to students in these two schools. That would be our intent. After talking to the facility team, we agree that it's best to keep it open where the building is still being utilized. Right now, the football field and the track are used by multiple high schools as a practice site, and we're looking to put a North Safety and Security site at Beaumont. We have one right now at Meter P, so we will look to put one in North St. Louis and one in South St. Louis as well. So that would mean Beaumont would still be utilized, i.e. not by students, but by district staff as we use this facility in a strategic kind of way to support food service, to support athletic program, and also support safety and security would be the three things, which will give us an opportunity if there was a need later on, as I think Dr. Roberts articulated, that it could still be available for use at a later point in time. So those are the things that I will address at this point in time, and now turn it over to the facility team and come back to take any kind of questions after they complete their presentation.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Adams and board. So the next part of the presentation, we'll dig more deeper into the environmental piece of it. And this is it'd be a joint effort with environmental consultants, principal, Mr. Jeffrey Faust, as well as his team, Mr. James Earl and Anthony Haggard. So I'll kind of begin with the environmental concerns the district takes very, very, very seriously. From the air that the students breathe and staff to the water that they drink from, it's been regularly tested. And any issues are corrected and eliminated. The district is committed to maintaining a healthy environment in which teachers can teach and students can learn. So how do we get there? How do we get here? Under the leadership of Mr. Roger Casey, in 2007, the Operations Department prioritized how we document and stay in compliance with any environmental regulations. The district recommended City Design Group and Environmental Consultants, LLC, to provide those environmental services. Currently, I would like to show what we had prior to 2007 and the documentation provided since then. So on the table, I'd like to call Exhibit A, we see the pre-2007, where we have two binders. Mr. James Earl is showing you what we had prior to 2007. Since then, from 2007 until now, these are all the documentation that we provided to the district for all of our schools to address any environmental concerns. So with that, I will pass it on to the principal, Mr. Jeff Faust, to talk more about some of the lead and environmental updates within the district.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Members of the board, members of administration, great to see you again. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Jeff Faust. I am one of the principals of Environmental Consultants. We've had the privilege and the honor of supporting the children and staff of the St. Louis Public Schools since 2007. Back in 2007, we went through a lengthy request for qualification process, and fortunately, our firm did very well in that process. Our team is stacked with leaders in the K-12 industry when it comes to dealing with environmental issues such as lead-based paint, asbestos, and other types of issues like indoor air quality and mold. We've been very fortunate since then. It's taken a lot of hard work. Actually, some of the team members from my staff who are actually working in the buildings this evening have taken a break from their day to come here just to see how this process works and to get a flavor for why we do what we do. So I'm thankful for them. Also wanted to give a quick thank you to Ms. Lori Willis, who's here tonight, for helping us with our presentation, as well as Meredith Pierce. So we greatly appreciate that. Just a quick introduction about what is lead. Lead's a naturally occurring metal. It's found in many regions, particularly in the Midwest. It's found basically all throughout Missouri. In fact, just south of here is what they call the lead belt, where much of it is mined. Historically, lead was used in construction. It was used in our gasoline, in our dishware, in our toys, and even a lot of the hobbies that we do, if you think of fishing or hunting or things like that. But as with so many things that were great at the time, we found out in later years they can actually be dangerous for our health, and that is certainly the case with lead. The biggest issue of concern is our kids who are under the age of 7. Those are the kids who are most likely to feel the toxic effects of lead poisoning. Health effects include negatively impacting children's brains, their developing nervous systems, reducing IQ, and behavioral problems. That statement in and of itself is the most important statement I can make. I've made it a lot over my last 30 years of doing this, and it's really why we get out of bed in the morning, is to provide a safe learning environment for our students in our K-12 facilities. Also, I'd like to make the point that many people in this country, as well as other countries, have linked lead poisoning to many of the racial and social injustices within our country. Ironically, I wrote my master's thesis on that in 1993, if that gives you an idea. And we still battle the exact same issues today. So the good news in the city of St. Louis, is that over the last decade, in fact, a little longer than last decade, the mayor's teams have continued to work hard to get federal funding to reduce lead poisoning in our schools and in our homes in St. Louis. They've done a great job. If you notice, lead poisoning results have come down throughout the years, so that's great news. When we came here in 2007, as part of my interview process, Mr. Casey looked me right in the eye, and I was just a lonely little partner on this team that had presented our qualifications to the district. And his comment was, Jeff, our mission statement is to govern boldly, was the phrase he used. I'm surprised I forgot it. But that being said, he said, we understand that lead-based paint may not necessarily be something that's regulated, but we want to win this war before it gets out of control. What can you do to help us win that war? And I took those words and really that conversation as my introduction to the team, and I was hoping to goodness we'd get the job to work for the St. Louis Public Schools. That really gave me what I felt was the will to know that we were going to be working somewhere that folks wanted to make a difference. So to this day, I'm very, very thankful for that opportunity. And like I said, I'm very thankful that we do govern boldly here at the St. Louis Public Schools. When we started in 2007, we went right from the frying pan into the fire. As you saw, Mr. Earl pointed out, we didn't get a lot of background records when we got here. In fact, that was the records that are just on that, the records that are on those tables are only the lead-based paint work that we've done at the St. Louis Public Schools. We've got at least that many, if not more, asbestos records, indoor air quality records, mold records, et cetera. I just asked our team to pull the lead records this evening so it'd give you a flavor for how much lead work we've done in the city schools to reduce lead poisoning. But in 2007, when we got here, the operations department was finishing off the air conditioning bond issue, and that's what we jumped into. And we were directed at that time, don't just do the minimum, do what's right. So that being said, we worked hard on getting the buildings air conditioned. We addressed environmental hazards such as asbestos and lead-based paint. One of the issues we ran into is that we were installing brand new air conditioners into buildings that were almost 100 years old. So while our air conditioning was a brand new system, our ductwork was 100 years old. Well, unfortunately, stuff in that ductwork does contain environmental hazards, and it can. So tonight, we're standing here in the middle of Clyde C. Miller, a relatively new building by all accounts. And if you look at the ductwork along here, you'll notice black debris around where those vents are, okay? Well, unfortunately, that black debris a lot of times isn't just black debris. It's what's in that debris, what comprises that debris that makes all the difference in the world. Here at Clyde C. Miller, this building is too new to have things like asbestos and lead issues. However, it could very well be degraded fiberglass, mold, particulates, et cetera, okay? At our older buildings, when we were air conditioning these buildings that were 100 years old, such as Soldan, Sumner, et cetera, what we found in the ductwork were things like asbestos and lead. So, and under the guise of governing boldly, we immediately went in and took actions to clean that ductwork so that the air that our children and staff breathe is clean. And I make that point because later when we talk about priorities, that is one of the remaining priorities for the district. After the HVAC bond issue was finished, the next project was specific to lead. And in 2009, SLPS replaced badly damaged original windows at 25 plus elementary schools. These windows had lead-based paint. They also had asbestos in them, and they were in bad shape, just buildings that maintenance could no longer keep up with. So the purpose of this work was to address lead hazards that were caused by the deteriorated windows. In conjunction with that work, what we did is we identified what HUD refers to as child-occupied facilities or portions of facilities. This is where the legislation and the guidance that's out there really targets it. Once again, it's these rooms where you have children under the age of 7 that are more likely to be impacted by lead poisoning. So in conjunction with the window project, we went into the 25 elementary schools and we looked at each of these rooms. And we went in, did testing, and as we identified concerns, we mitigated those hazards on the spot. I'm proud to say that that concept of management continues today. In fact, that's actually what our team has been working on this week. Next slide. In 2010, we felt like we had established a lot of trust equity with the voters, and SLPS went to the voters and asked for them to consider the Prop S bond initiative. Thankfully, it passed, and it passed with a nice margin. We used a lot of funds associated with the Prop S money to help reduce our lead hazards in schools. So if you look at the table, you'll actually kind of see volume-wise, it almost looks like a little bit of a bell curve. And the reality of it is that if you look at 2009 to about 2012, 2013, that was the bulk of Prop S. So we used that to reduce our lead hazards at that point. And since then, we've continued to work on maintenance activities, keeping our buildings safe, et cetera. Next slide, please. In 2016, SLPS was once again one of the leaders, and in a positive way. In response to the national events, the district began sampling drinking water samples or sources as part of its risk management program. Literally, I can remember this like it was yesterday, sitting in the board meetings and being on the front line of this. Literally, it was the first district that I knew of in the state of Missouri who did lead testing of its drinking water. And sadly enough, today, that's still not a state mandate. So there's a lot of schools in Missouri that have not done it, okay? SLPS did it in 2016. We were closely following the sampling that was being done at the Chicago Public Schools at the time, because I had friends working there and I was working in other school districts in the Illinois area. And we followed all the guidance documents and we followed all that other leadership as well to make certain we had a program that identified water sources that were a problem, identified those that did well, but also it identified the ones that may meet regulatory compliance, but could potentially be a problem in the near future. So once again, under this concept of governing boldly, we immediately put red flags as necessary so we could continue to monitor these situations. So like I said, while the state of Missouri does not mandate that schools test their drinking water for lead, SLPS started in 2016, and then every 3 years, which was 2019, we retested all the water sources again, and it is planned or scheduled to be done next year in 2022. On the off years of that, what we did is we test those water sources that were kind of in the yellow zone. That is, they may not have exceeded a standard, but we knew there was lead there, so we needed to watch them so they didn't go up. So that's part of that truly being proactive, a word that's often misoverused. This is a classic case where St. Louis Public Schools has been there every step of the way. When I say that they're a leader in water testing in the state of Missouri, that's no exaggeration. Although there's not a federal regulation targeting the reduction of lead in schools, SLPS made it a priority right away to establish a lead hazard reduction program. We currently work for well over 80 school districts just in the Illinois, Missouri area. That's our forte, is school districts. And I can tell you that the St. Louis Public Schools, the model that we created here, is one of only a few in the country that exist. So kudos to the district for being willing to step in the right thing. SLPS continues to maintain a practice of aggressive testing and mitigating. So with board approval, they allowed the operations department in our testing that takes place twice a year. We can go out and immediately correct it. We're able to correct small matters before they become big mistakes and have the potential to put our kids or our staff in jeopardy. So that being said, we've got a great program in place. Once again, kudos to the district. We continue with interim controls to identify and mitigate any lead hazards that are found out during our inspections. Like I said earlier, we do test all high-risk potable water sources, and we test all potable water sources every 3 years. So what does this lead hazard program look like? Everything at SLPS is big, right? Because I mean, we got a lot of schools. So by the time you take it times the number of schools we have, there aren't many small feats at the public schools. But the first one is just identifying what are your child occupied areas. Where do the kids who are our smallest kids, kindergarten, pre-K, where do they spend their time? We have to identify those classrooms. We have to identify, where they eat, where they play, et cetera, et cetera. Every 6 months, we do inspections. And along with that, we will do testing for lead-based paint, dust sampling. And like I said, once a year, at least once a year, we'll do water testing analysis. A big part of what we do is training so that our custodial staff knows what to do and what not to do when it comes to dealing with lead-based paint. Make certain that everybody is certified to do the work that they do. Our program includes all the mitigation efforts, which is the vast majority of what you see on that table. What you see on that table when you dig into it is a lot of scientific data, but it's also records of who did what and when. And what I asked the operations team the day I started was, the day that you get rid of us, we'll leave happily, understood. But I want to make certain that all these documents stay in place so that the next folks who come in and govern behind us know what we did, why we did it, and they can pick up from where we went. And also, to me, it is very important that that information stay readily available to the public to administration, to staff, et cetera. So with the operations department, they actually gave us a room on the second floor of the Buildings and Grounds building where all these documents are locked up along with our asbestos records, because I know that the district did more lead work than that prior to 2007. We just can't find those records anywhere. And likewise, we were missing 9 years of asbestos records that are just gone, that disappeared. So to me, it's very important from an integrity standpoint and a transparency standpoint that we take every document we have and we leave it for the folks who follow us. I'm going to talk about what are some of our safety priorities as far as moving forward, what's next with the lead program. My opinion is we need to continue to inspect, monitor, and mitigate lead hazards as they are identified. Weatherization projects are a big deal. This is usually not something that can be done with maintenance money. This is a long-term investment. But for instance, as you look at this building, you'll see watermarks on the ceiling here. You'll see the far wall over here, the west wall, where you can see brown streaks coming down the wall. That's the type of weatherization projects we have to continue to fund when we have funds available. Because when we keep the outside of our buildings dry and well maintained, it helps keep the inside of our buildings maintained. In addition to that, we do need to continue with our classroom painting and repair projects. Another item that is very important, although possibly of a lower priority, is exterior fence repair and fence replacement projects. This was something that was brought to my attention recently. That was an area of concern. But to give you an idea of magnitude, at the city schools, they just fixed last year working on the wrought iron fences. These are the beautiful historic decorative fences. There's 27,000 linear feet of those fences in the district. That's over 5 miles. Those fences are now in good shape. However, we have chain link fence that is in poor condition because it was painted with lead-based paint. It never should have been. And there's really nothing to do with that chain link fence other than to replace it and put in a new poly-coated fence. But once again, we have over 26,000 feet of that fencing throughout the district. And once again, over 5 miles of that type of fencing. So these are some items that are food for thought moving forward. One of the big items, number 2, and this really ties in nicely to the COVID era. I spend a lot of time talking about the newest US EPA guidance for schools on virus mitigation and increasing ventilation in schools. This is what battling COVID is all about on the front lines when you're talking about full capacity of your classrooms once again. Well, one of the ways you do that is through cleaning of the antiquated ductwork and mechanical systems. So what we know in the past is that we've identified lead, asbestos, and other environmental hazards in our ductwork. This ductwork, once again, in many cases is almost 100 years old. It's never been cleaned to the best of our knowledge. And more importantly, by cleaning that, we improve indoor air quality and ventilation in our HVAC systems, which is another way to tie nicely into what's going on with trying to deal with virus mitigation, as well as increased ventilation under the new US EPA guidance documents. And as I often mention to anybody who will listen to me, good indoor air quality has been linked many times over to, number 1, improved academic performance, and number 2, decreased absenteeism. All 2 items that we can't wait to improve upon. And then the last item under safety priorities is really some infrastructure upgrades. So as the President Biden is talking about replacing the dilapidated water pipe systems throughout the country, we have the same problem here at the schools. In other words, it doesn't make sense to replace the water line out front that may be made of lead if we still have lead lines that come to our buildings. So we've done a good job with the water program of replacing dilapidated water fountains, but we still have more to replace. And we also have piping in the district, some of which contains lead solder, some of which is actually comprised of lead, and some of which has lead fittings. So this would be an ideal matter to pick up for the future.
So to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Faust presented, In terms of funding priorities, from an operations perspective, we generally deal with those spaces, classrooms, where children are occupying or spend most of their time. So generally in the classrooms, offices, within the buildings. And then we go to the envelope, the building envelope, doing a lot of window replacements and or tuck pointing. Lastly, we deal with the grounds. So when it comes to priorities with funding, it's generally in that order, mostly where the students spend most of their time, which are in the classrooms in the school buildings. So to kind of summarize the presentation, the district, we have a lot of beautiful architectural buildings, historic buildings. But due to the age, we know that we have lead hazards that exist within our facilities, and they must be managed. So we know, as Mr. Faust mentioned, that there are injustices that exist that's linked to lead paint, that's linked to the dust and some of the water. And from our perspective, from the operations perspective, the policies, some of the policies and procedures, some of the policies and procedures that have been established by the operations department are not just for right now, but intended to be able to be picked up for the future generation. So, and most importantly, it's in service of our students, staff, and to the stakeholders within the district. So at this point, are there any questions?
Questions for Mr. Faust or Mr. Watson?
I just want to say I really appreciate the presentation because lead poisoning is a serious issue here in the city of St. Louis. I've been familiar with it for several years. I started off back in 2003 with the St. Louis Lead Prevention Coalition, going around doing lead education. And I understand that lead stays in the bones for over 30 years. And I guess what you're doing is really important. I'm hoping one of these days that we can really start replacing our buildings with new facilities. And lead has had a devastating effect on our students and families. And I'm really hoping that we can consider testing over the age of 7 because many of our students are affected by lead. And I just want to say I really do appreciate all the hard work because that is really hard. And we also have the problem of asbestos. So I thank you for all the hard work that you put into this presentation. Thank you.
I'd like to echo Donna's sentiments as well. I just have a question about if we know we have a lead issue, what is the timeline to deal with it? And an example would be, I think it came up last year around fencing at CJA.
So we generally deal with any issues, hazardous, any environmental concerns as soon as they pop up, as soon as they come. In addition, or with the fence situation, in particular, because we did go out for an RFP, as Mr. Faust mentioned, we have over 5 miles of fencing that needs to be replaced. The bid came in over $1 million. So if we're going to do, and this is where equity comes into place, not only for the Classical Junior Academy, but district-wide, we need to make sure that we replace those fences.
I'd just like to echo the sentiments of Donna and Dr. Roberts. Thank you all for what you've been doing and working with our district to make these necessary changes and find out what we need to do for the health and safety of our students and staff. Dr. Adams, my question is, I know we had kind of a 2-part presentation. So the first part about the schools and this one about lead and asbestos. Are we reserving this question time just for the latter part, or?
Either. It could be lead or the facility moves that I talked about earlier.
Gotcha. Okay, so perfect. So my question is about Beaumont. So for example, you have there that the cosmetology program would move to Vashon, and you noted that students, the student concern is that they have to leave the school that they're at for half the day to go to Beaumont. I guess 2-part question then. The students that are leaving, they're coming from many different schools, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So if this cosmetology program is moved to Vashon, would only Vashon students have access to it, or would they still be coming from different schools?
At this
to go
point in
to-
time, it'll be only exclusive to Vashon. At this point in time, that is the recommendation right now. So those students who are participating in the program, if they want to continue, because they normally take it in their junior and senior year. We have very few students participating this year because they were doing a virtual. The seniors are going to be leaving, juniors will be coming in, but it will be students who are assigned to Vashon at this point in time. And that's the same thing for the culinary program. Obviously, we have one here at Clyde Miller, but we'll have a second one at Gateway.
Got you. So then I guess my question, and I don't know if there's a current answer to that question, is for those students, would not having the program at all outweigh it only being, outweigh the fact that they have to travel from their home schools to go to Vashon, to go to Beaumont?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, Ms. Lang.
So is there a way that we can find out whether or not, well, I guess from your standpoint, would students rather not have the program at all? Because, I mean, the program going to Vashon, again, only opens it up to Vashon. Right now, it's basically district-wide, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So again, my question would be, with the issue that's been brought up of them having to leave their school for half the day to go to a different site, does that outweigh them not having the program or access to the program at all?
What we would try to do is to obviously assist those students who are in their junior years who have 1 year left to still participate in the program if they want to participate in the program, whatever that looks like, if that means transporting them. But as it relates to future students going into the program, it will be exclusively to Vashon and to Gateway for the culinary program. I think the numbers are around 40 or 50 students who are juniors in the program. So we would do everything in our power to accommodate those students, even if it meant, to your point, going to Vashon to finish that last year of the program. But for all new students, it would have to be in Vashon or Roosevelt, similar to what we have right now with Gateway. If you want to be in the fire EMT program, you have to go to Gateway. You can't be half day at Gateway and half day somewhere else. So these will be programs specific to those schools, similar to whatever all of the other schools are right now. But we would try to accommodate the students that are in the program now to see if they want to continue the program to stay at if it moves to Vashon, if the board approves it moving to Vashon, or the other program moving to Gateway. The numbers are around 40 or 50, to about a total of 104 students total right now.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm looking at the survey that was conducted on the students from, yes, from that school. And I guess my concern is I'd like to have seen a survey for all of the students who are having to move or, collaborate or go to another school. It seems as if because they have a advisory board, and there's a lot of money flowing around in their advisory board. And many of our students, just say for instance, at a Beaumont or a Vashon or something like that, they don't have an advisory board where you have people who have lots of money. And I just would hope that we would be more, give a listening ear to all of our students, because a lot of them are going through changes. I looked at my email and I do pay attention, and a lot of the students express some concern about people being mean to them and that kind of thing. And I'm sure many of our students have some apprehension about going to various schools because of the climate right now. But I just want to see more equitable voicing of how our students feel, other than just, I appreciate this right here, but I want to know how the students at Beaumont feel, the students at Vashon feel, all of them that have to go through some changes, because their opinion, I want them to understand that their opinions matter just as much as the students who might have a little bit more money.
Ms. Jones, your comments are well taken. We did not do the survey in isolation. We did do it with the advisory board, but your points are well taken. Hindsight is 2020. We probably should have done the same thing with every school we look to close and we did not do that. We did not take surveys of students in the same kind of way. We did not. So your point is really well taken.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is for the team that just gave us the report on the facilities. I appreciate that report. What's the end game, though? What are you asking us for? I mean, it seems like we have some issues, but or is there going to be a request for dollars so that we could resolve these issues? Because, you know, I think at the beginning he mentioned all the black stuff in those.
I think we have
Yes.
dollars already targeted to support the priorities. Obviously, there's been a request for fencing, as has already been indicated from one school. We are looking at all of those requests, but we have dollars put in our budget on an annual basis to do what they do, which is the water, the lead. So we're already budgeted to that. As we look at the ESSER dollars, we may be bleeding some more dollars out since this is about air quality with the vents and those kinds of things. That's why we'll be coming back in July with a recommendation to you relative to what we're looking at. And this is a way to make you aware of what we are doing and what we might expand to do.
Okay, thank you. Then my other question is about Beaumont. I guess I was thinking that until Adam asked the question and it was answered that when we transfer those programs to other schools, that the other students would have access to those programs. Because I know amongst the board, there was a lot of talk about having a technical school so that people who may not go to college can leave high school with some usable skills that would support them and families or future families. It seems like if we close Beaumont Technical Center, we actually are moving backwards away from the goal of having programs available to all students to learn skills. I think the two skills, the culinary and the what do you call that? Cosmetology are just two, but it seems like we would be expanding that versus reducing that availability to our students. And it concerns me that we are not expanding the technical courses available, and instead we're reducing that, making it less available to students who are not college bound.
So let me provide my interpretation of my opinion about that. We have about 5,600 students. We only have 40 students, 100 students who are participating in the program. At Vashon, which is the second highest enrolled school, about 650 students scheduled to be next year. At Gateway, over 1,000 students. So that represents 1,600 students. Students will still have access. They'll just be targeted at that school and get the kind of support they need. Transportation is a major, major issue. Kids don't want to leave their buildings. So while we might start out with 200 kids every year saying they want to go, we wind up with only about 110, 112 students participating. But we have all of this great equipment there. It costs us $1 million to set it up here, and we only have on a regular basis 100 students a year participating. If we put it within a school, we easily will have 200 students in that school utilizing it and taking advantage of it. Yes, it will be targeted to those schools, but that's not any different than the baccalaureate program at Metro. That's not any different than the CSMB medical program at SMB. It is not different at all in any way, shape, or form or the culinary program here. Students go to schools where they think they can take advantage of a program that they are interested in. And so that's the real challenge here. The challenge is, I understand the rationale from Mr. Lang and yourself as it relates to that, but it is very, very, very difficult to convince students who continue to want to come to this program on a part-time basis. The reason why we went to the community college, and it's a full program at the community college, where students are there, 30 students a year, 60 totally, they stay full-time at the community college to complete that program. We don't do back and forth, half and half, because it's just too impossible, too hard for a student to kind of divide his time, his energy, and his interest in that kind of way. So this was a great attempt to put this at Beaumont. We thought the numbers would be a lot higher. We didn't compensate for the challenges around transportation and student interest. And so what we're doing now is pivoting away from it with the idea that it might be better to look at incorporating this in two of our larger schools, Number one, the largest school is Gateway. The second largest school is Vashon. So that's why these two sites are being looked at as the possibilities for this particular program. Because Vashon graduates about 100 kids a year, and Gateway graduates about 250 kids a year. So that's the reason why we're looking at these two sites, and they have the space to accommodate these two particular programs. So I understand the concern. If we were taking something away from students, the 40 that Mr. Lang mentioned, I think it's worth us compensating and working with those kids to make sure that they can complete it. But as far as any new students, we'll advertise these programs and give them opportunity to go to these schools such that they can participate in these kinds of programs, similar to what we're doing at all of our magnet schools.
I guess I was just wondering, because we've had this conversation, way back in our day, before Gateway there was O'Fallon Technical School. It was the school that, because where Gateway is, what used to be O'Fallon, and it was the technical school for the city. And back then, as students, we were able to go to our schools and then go to O'Fallon Tech for a specific skill if we wanted that. But that was only for students who wanted that. And it seems like we're dividing but not conquering, because we have so many programs, so many different places. O'Fallon Tech, when it was a technical school, the thing was is that if you were going to get a technical education, everybody went to the same place. So the population of that school was bigger. It was well attended. You go to the morning program or the afternoon program. We do have a large population in our district who may not be college bound. And it seems like it could be very necessary that we, instead of having programs all over the place, maybe focus on a particular technical center, so it makes more economic sense to have that, and more students who want those kind of programs can attend, versus having some here who aren't interested in cosmetology but go to Vashon for another reason, but they don't have culinary school as a option because it's not there. And I hope that as a district, we maybe think more about this and consider what really is the best way to provide technical education. Do you divide it all over the place, or do you centralize it so we get that number of students in a centralized place, the way that I know North County and South County do, and then of course the city many, many years ago. And it's just something to consider and discuss later.
No, I think it's an excellent point. I think, what we have to, with some direction from the board, really discuss the notion of taking programs away from other places to do that. The Gateway programs that they have there, some other programs from other schools, if we make that decision, which I think is a recommendation the board can make, especially in light of looking at ESSER and what we're doing around those kinds of things, is that we would have to take some programs from schools to create the kind of hub program that I've heard about in terms of the CTE kind of component, taking and putting in one location. And quite frankly, there have been some staff in the CTE office who made that kind of recommendation. That is something that they have talked about as an idea, but it will mean changing what we do and reducing some programs at schools that have multiple programs right now. So it is not something that I'm disagreeing with. I'm saying we're going to have to rethink how we look to do this.
Dr. Adams, I do have a question about Beaumont. And I'm noticing that you're saying here that it's going to be also used for safety and security in North City sites. So I'm wondering, when you're closing Northwest and they have a law program, isn't it possible that perhaps we can incorporate the law program into the Beaumont site as well, since you're going to have safety and security there, and perhaps allow our students to experience some educational opportunities there instead of closing the law program down totally from Northwest?
We were transferring the law program. I'm not sure what school site we were looking to move it to. I think we were looking, I don't want to, my memory is not good. I can't remember exactly what school. We weren't closing it, we were moving it, but it sounds like you're recommending moving it to Beaumont in some way, shape, or form, as opposed to moving it to whatever school that we're looking to move it to. I can't remember what school we're moving it to. I just don't remember. But it's one of the comprehensive schools we were looking to move it to. I think that is a consideration that we could go back and look at. It's not one that we had put on the table because we were looking to move the programs from Beaumont, but it is something that could be considered.
Dr. Adams, I think our board is interested in student outcomes, and so this would be an opportunity for a survey to determine how many of our students are actually interested in the localized technical site. We talk about it, but this is the time to include our students.
Noted. So if I want to restate, what you're asking for is for us to do some kind of survey about what the interest level is of kids as it relates to the centralized kind of environment for a career in tech.
To determine if there's a need for it, I think we would have to start with our students.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But to add on to that, which I think is a great idea, I would offer the idea of making sure that there is a comprehensive list of different options that students would choose, like while looking at that. So not just, schools in the school being in one site as it relates to the tech or trades that we would offer, but here's a list of what we're going to do. We're going to have engineering, computer science, cosmetology, food, that type of thing. And then from there also do some analytics around which one got the highest amount, so that if that does happen, we're able to know what programs would be most successful in that school.
And it seems that the law program was moving to Gateway. Ms. Jones, that's what I was just provided. Okay.
I wanted to speak to what you brought up, Donna, which I think is a great point about CSNV. I think when I initially heard of, or when we were initially presented with the proposal on CSNV going into the old Cleveland site, knowing that those buildings are annexed, but they don't really overlap, like they're their own spaces, but they do have an annex. I immediately thought of like what the synergies could be. I know that from the CSMB standpoint, Alex Shank, who's a great friend of mine, really has built up that coding program over there. As we saw in the awards presentation, the recognition. And to me, like, even if one student could walk across that annex from CVPA that is interested in coding and gets interested in it and is able to participate, I feel like that's a win for the district. And on the flip side, and win for that student. And on the flip side, if there's a student that did choose this for its academics and its rigor, or whatever it may be, but they also have an opportunity to perform on stage in one of the programs that are over there, that's a win as well, even if it's with the student. And while I understand for students, you have a home site, you have a school and a building that you've become enamored with, like I understand all that, and I can understand wanting to be part of the process. But I think what was really disheartening for me and somewhat disappointing, because I read every single email I read from parents and students, but the way that they were talking about this move, aside from those factors, but the projections that they were putting onto CVPA students, the way they were talking about a culture of a school that they've never stepped into. And these are parents as well as students. It's really disheartening for me because we have different buildings, we have different names on the front of the building, but you're all SLPS students. To outperform this school, so we don't want to mix and mingle with them, or we shouldn't even be in close proximity. It's about all our schools, and honestly, if we were having the same passion and the same drive for all the schools that we have, instead of just our own school or what our child is getting, we'd probably be in a better place. But I think that for me was very off-putting, and I just wanted to call that out for those for our dish, or for you as board members to consider. But that being said, I think that there are opportunities to again hear students, especially on the CVPA side. How are they feeling about this, and what new opportunities that presents? And I think if we're able to call those out and share those, hopefully this can be a more collaborative and engaging process.
Are there any more questions as it pertains to lead? Are there any more questions as it pertains to the other facilities matters, the program moves recommended by Dr. Adams? Dr. Adams, I believe you have a slide with the 2 recommendations. Would you be able to pull that up?
Yeah, I think it's on your last PowerPoint. I added one more thing about the calendar change, but I'm going to not discuss that tonight and wait until the closed session, not the closed session, I'm sorry, the work session to talk about recommendation number 2. I did talk to the board at the work session about reducing the school year to end about 4 days, which ends on the 28th of May, but I'll wait until next work session to do that one. The one I'm really asking the board to look at is recommendation number 1.
Okay, thanks. Is there a board member who would like to make a motion? It's also on your, it's the same as in our slide deck that we got ahead of time.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the relocation of the CSMB school to Cleveland, Head Chapman to CSMB, and the program relocation of Beaumont to Gateway and Vashon.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further questions or discussion?
Is there any way to separate those by taking CSMB and the Nasheed Chapman separately from the Beaumont?
Yes, ma'am, there is. I guess it's a friendly amendment that somebody would make, but
we can withdraw the second.
That's probably easier. Yeah, if
Who
some,
seconded?
Susan, if you want to withdraw your second, and then Adam, you need to withdraw your motion, we can go over, or it can be an amendment.
I'm willing to withdraw my second.
You are?
Yes.
And I withdraw the motion.
Regina, would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the relocation of CSMB to Cleveland and Nasheed Chapman to Wyman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Vowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Is there anyone who would like to make another motion? Hearing none, we'll move into the consent agenda. So there is one walk-on item that we will take separately. And that's item 51. Are there any other items that the board, any board member would like to take separately?
Yes, I had a couple of them. And I could just present all my questions if that's okay.
So which did you want to take separately?
03 and 21. I mean, 03 and 49, sorry.
Okay. Are there any others that the board would like to take separately? So I'd like to make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 04, 13, 21, 01, and 04, 13, 21, 02. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane, Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Vowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve 4, 13, 21, 03.
Second.
Regina, you had a question?
Yeah, I guess the way it reads, it sounds like to me that the contract for the insurance has not been negotiated because it states that there may be a possible 5% increase. There's a contingency for a 5% increase. And I was just concerned that we were asked to vote on something that has not already gone through negotiations.
yes, ma'am, I'll address that. Mrs. Banks provided me with the context of this and she can come forward if she wants to, but it is standard practice within the insurance industry to not release insurance pricing months in advance of the renewal date. We oftentimes do not get final pricing until June because the contract starts July 1. So we ask for the contingency to mitigate the possibility that we haven't requested sufficient cost approval from the board. So we're 3 months out, but we have to get it before you by a certain time so you could approve it. And so the insurance company doesn't give us the real price till like June. And so that's the reason why. That's for all of our insurances.
Okay, thanks. I think I needed to understand your process.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate you answering that.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 04-13-2104
Second.
through 04-13-2148.
Second.
Questions or discussion on any of these?
Just a question on 04-13-2108. We're participating with the School of Nursing. Do we ever get any of those nurses into the district?
I think this question came up last year. I think we got one nurse, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but it did come up last year. I could get you some information to let you know for sure. But I think that number was one.
Any other questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'd like to move that we approve 04-13-2149.
Second.
Regina?
Yeah, I know this, we are contracting with the Busch Stadium for graduation, but I wanted to make sure that we had proper social distancing protocol in place during the graduations before it's approved.
Yes, ma'am. Any gathering over 10 has to be approved by the health department, Dr. Echols, and the Busch Stadium and security team are working with the district and the St. Louis City Department of Health to ensure the protocols are followed. Students will receive tickets for the section of the stadium and will be spaced out in seats as per the directives at the time for the outdoor facility. Families will be given tickets for sections and will be seated in pods of 4 with appropriate spacing in between. There will be hand sanitizer available throughout the stadium, and all guests will be temperature checked at the door. So we have to submit a total plan to him. Again, I want to be really careful that the board is approving this, but they did last year as well, and then there was an uptick in cases, and we have to pull back because of that. So we are hopeful that we can go forward, but we're monitoring closely what's happening in the city of St. Louis. As you may have heard yesterday, there's been an uptick in cases, so we are monitoring it really closely, but we have worked with them. They have approved our plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 4-13-2150.
Second.
Are there questions or discussion on this item? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Our last item is 4-13-2151, which is the budget. I'd like to make a motion to approve that item, 4-13-2151. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. This is the recommendation to approve the budget, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Ms. Banks, am I right? I just want to make sure. I'll let Ms. Banks
Because
come up.
I was really confused by it because the word
Yeah.
allocations was used.
Yeah, the allocations really are referencing like the state and federal appropriations that we get, which we have not actually received. We usually get those in late April or May. So we're using estimates Whereas with general operating budget, we're coming up with estimates based on tax levies, assessed valuations, and for food service, they're non-entitlement type of estimates, whereas the state and federal appropriations, we have not received the actual ones from the state and feds yet.
I guess then, is there a way to reword this for us to approve and accept the budget as presented tonight, including the allocations from state and local governments or something? Because I guess I just didn't even know this was about the actual budget, the whole budget. So
Yeah, I think as far as the challenges, we are approving the budget probably 2 months ahead of time because of the obvious transition that's taking place with the board. And so we would normally come in June to ask you to do this, and we will have some hard numbers. And so that's the wiggle piece around this, why we're asking to be done now. I think we could possibly change the language. I don't know, Ms. Banks, I know you have to have specific language for this to be moved, so you could answer this better than me.
Well, I don't think the language is as important. So if we would like to make an adjustment, I think that's.
Yeah, I would just like to say that we'd like to approve, you would like the board to approve and accept the fiscal year 2021, 2022 SLPS operating budget, including the revenue, the expenditures budgeted, as well as the allocations from state and local entities. So I could just make sure we understand this is the budget.
Understood.
That adjustment of the wording that she made is fine.
Can you make a motion to amend with the wording that as you wanted to read?
Yeah. I make a motion to amend 04-13-2151 to read, to approve and accept the fiscal year 2021 through 2022 St. Louis SLPS general operating budget, which includes operating revenues, expenditures, and allocations from state and federal entities.
Is there a second to that amendment? Any questions or discussion on that amendment? Ms. Williams, so we are voting on the amendment only?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Vowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
So we will now vote on the motion, or yes, on the motion as amended. Are there any further questions or discussion on that before we vote? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Vowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
We have a proposed standing committee on budget equity and transparency by Adam. So I will turn this over to Adam.
So I presented the motion to this board last time we met and sent out Dorothy sent out the document as well. So the only change was to include in the guiding, well, there are a couple changes. One, to include in the guiding documents that we specify that board members are also part of the standing committee. So that is there. There's also clarity around what the tenets are for. So understanding that the overarching umbrella categories for the goals that the committee would be working toward, but the goals would change year to year depending on the needs of the district around budget equity and transparency. The other change was to clarify the language around what the committee would be voting on as their official goals. So the committee will vote to establish their goals. And so those goals that pass with unanimous or pass with a majority committee approval will be the annual goals for the year. And then any recommendations or any decisions or work that comes out of the committee can then present those as recommendations to this board.
Yes, the document we received on the committee structure did not include board member representation. I just want to make sure that
Yeah, that was the first thing I said that we added.
Oh, okay, so the revised one we received didn't include it. That was the question I had, the concern I had. I don't know if the wrong one was sent out, though.
Does it say, let me see, save these?
This is the one I got an email. It didn't include board representation.
Yeah, that's the old one.
Okay, yeah, so I think the old one got sent out. At least that's the one I got. So I make a motion that we approve this standing committee with the adjustment that the board representation is added.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Are there any other committees that wish to make a report? So we'll move into board member reports. We'll start with you, Donna.
None at this time.
Natalie, I don't want to miss you. Go to Natalie. I'm sorry, Cheryl.
I don't have a real report. I just wanted to say congratulations to our new two incoming members, Ms. Tony Cousins and Mr. Matt Davis. I look forward to working with them in the future and welcome to the board.
Regina.
None other than I want to thank Dorothy and Susan for their outstanding work as board members. Having served as board just maybe 6 months or so, you guys put in some hard work, and I just wanted you to know that we really do appreciate it. Even though sometimes we don't always agree, we understand how much you work. So thank you.
Madam President, a point of interruption, if you don't mind. We have some presentations like we like to do, and then have board reports, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Ms. Willis?
Well, as you can see that there are some interesting gifts over on that table, but I'd like to start out with, if you will allow me, a resolution for Dorothy Rhodey Collins, as sponsored by Alderwoman Annie Rice of the 8th Ward. Whereas we have been apprised that St. Louis Public Schools educator, parent, and board member Dorothy Rhodey Collins opted not to run for re-election to the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis in 2021. And whereas Ms. Rhodey Collins was elected to the board in 2017 and served as president during several critically important periods in district history. And whereas these include, but are not limited to, the transition of governance from a state-appointed special administrative board to the locally elected board, the consolidation of schools to more accurately reflect district enrollment, and the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas Ms. Rhodey Collins' service to St. Louis Public Schools dates back to 2006, when she joined the district as a science teacher at Northwest Academy of Law. And whereas during her 6 years at Northwest, Ms. Rhodey Collins helped transition the school from a middle school to a high school. And whereas she sought out opportunities to support and nurture students and staff, serving as science department chair and advanced placement coordinator, as well as leading district-level professional development workshops. And whereas we recognize Ms. Rhodey Collins' lasting impact on the board and the district as an advocate for quality schools in the city. and as an advocate for all students to have the resources, experiences, and opportunities they need to prepare for the next step of their education. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations, say thank you and good luck to Ms. Rhodey Collins for her service to the citizens of St. Louis through her work on the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis. We further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to her at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. And I believe this would be that time and place. Ms. Rhodey Collins, if you join Dr. Adams for a photo. And while they're handling that, I'd like to say that the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation has sponsored some very lovely Waterford crystal clocks. And now we have a resolution for Susan R. Jones, sponsored by Alderwoman Pam Boyd of the 27th Ward. Whereas we have been apprised that St. Louis Public Schools graduate, parent, and longtime board member Susan R. Jones opted not to run for re-election to the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis in 2021. And whereas Ms. Jones was originally elected to the board in 2013 and was quickly voted to leadership roles by her colleagues, secretary from 2013 to 2015, president from 2015 to 2018, and vice president from 2020 to 2021. And whereas she was always willing to share her knowledge and experience with others, helping to onboard new members. And whereas Ms. Jones used her position as a board leader to advocate that the elected board regain the ability to govern the district. And whereas we recognize Ms. Jones's lasting impact on the board and the district through her dedication to social justice, equity, and love of community, consistently calling for every neighborhood in the city to have an outstanding public school. And whereas Ms. Jones served on the Consortium Partnership Network Board for 2 years and has been an advocate for change through school-based autonomy. And whereas Ms. Jones is a proud product of St. Louis Public Schools and continues her family's legacy of board service with a specific focus on student health and wellness. And whereas Ms. Jones has used her platform as a school board member and her myriad skills and talents, including her background and expertise in business and marketing, to shine a light on the positive attributes and accomplishments of St. Louis Public Schools. And whereas Ms. Jones has also used her platform to support critical work to lower dropout rates, increase graduation rates, and decrease homelessness in the district. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations, say thank you and good luck to Ms. Susan R. Jones after nearly a decade of service to the citizens of the St. Louis through her work on the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis. We further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of the resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to her at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor.
You had to read that before my picture.
Thank you.
Madam President.
So we'll return to board member reports. Thank you very much. Adam.
Yep, I just wanted to, well, I have two, well, one thing and then words of gratitude. The St. Louis Office of Financial Empowerment, I know we've sent this out to the district channels, but it's having a session upcoming, I believe it's Thursday, but again, it's been sent out, but just wanted to let parents and families know you can go on to that website, stlofe.org. To find out. It's a college savings seminar. So whether your child is in kindergarten or in 12th grade, there are going to be some useful tips. It's a free virtual session for you to get information, support, and get some questions asked and answered around college savings. Dorothy and Susan, I just wanted to say thank you for, as someone who's only been on this board for 2 years, thank you both for your service return to governance and also post. Dorothy as president, that is a lot of responsibility, and there are a lot of critics that are up on this board as well. And I know you have to deal with all of that, or had to. And so we don't take that lightly. So I appreciate the poise that you've shown as a president of this board. And Susan as well, I know you served previously as president. And I would say that I know that having spoken to other people who have served on the board during the reign of the SAB, how tough it is to come in and feel like, okay, is our voice being heard? Are we actually making change? And just knowing for you all so even though you are transitioning off now, know that that is not in vain. All the work that you have done has led us to where we are right now. And hopefully this group, the new board members and board members to come can carry that torch and continue to drive the district in the right direction. So thank you for your service and any words of wisdom, ways that you've challenged me and helped me grow in my position as well.
Joyce.
I'd like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and thank the both of you for your service and commitment to the young people in St. Louis Public Schools and in the broader community. Two things. I was in attendance at the Legislative Forum on yesterday. Dr. Adams and Dorothy participated on a panel about charter school expansions and why should we care. They represented the district extremely well. And I would also like to take this opportunity to invite our elected officials who represent us in Jefferson City and make critical decisions around our schools. I'd like to invite them to the district to interact with the school board and the superintendent so that you are well informed as you make those very, very critical decisions. And finally, in response to Donna's question regarding retired teachers, House Bill 811 is on the table. It says access to qualified teachers. This bill allows retired teachers to continue to collect retirement while working full-time for up to 4 years as when there's a critical shortage of teachers in the subject area. And so that's being debated in Jeff City as we speak. And so Dr. Adams, if you would follow through on that statement I made in terms of inviting our elected officials who make those critical decisions regarding schools, that would certainly be appreciated.
Can you repeat the House bill number?
House Bill 811, and is sponsored by Black.
So Susan, I'm going to let you speak, but I want to say something to you first. Thank you, just as a fellow board member, but as a parent and a city resident, and just a genuine back to elected governance. You are brave and bold, and I have learned so much from you over the past 4 years. For me, you have set the standard for what it means to be a woman in leadership, because you are always genuinely supportive of other women and other leaders instead of being competitive. And from the very first day I met you and all during the campaign, I knew that you had my back, and that even though, you know, we have been on opposite sides of many, many issues over the years, that has never come between us as people. And you have always demonstrated such profoundly genuine leadership that I value very much. So I thank you for everything you've done for this board and this district.
Thank you, Dorothy. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for the kind words. I want to call my daughter up. She's in the back of the room. She was waiting on me to the side, but if somebody can just turn around and tap her, I think her headphones are on, so she can come up, please. Madison is an involuntary board member here, so she's been with us since she was born, actually, so. She's never afraid to come up, but today's my last day and she is. Come on, Maddie, I need you. I do.
Come on, Maddie.
Maybe she'll make her way as I speak, but I'll go ahead and start. Hello, everyone. Today marks the last day that I was served. In this capacity as Vice President. I must say that this has truly been an honor. Excuse me. Leading up to this moment, I've received lots of love and well wishes, along with the magic question of what's next. I'd like to start this off by giving thanks. Thanks to the amazing community for electing me on top every time to do what's in the best interest of our children. To those that I've met on my campaign trail, canvass for me, put up yard signs, including those that I may not have agreed with all the time, I say thank you. It's been 8 years and I can still remember shaking in my heels and presenting my platform at different meetings across the city because I knew I wanted to make a difference. I knew in my heart that even though I was coming onto a board that was not in governance, there was power in the people, and that despite the narrative, democracy would prevail. To the board members that I've served with over the years, thanks for trusting my leadership. I can't thank you enough for your hard work and dedication to our students. A special thanks to Donna Jones, Kathy Steyer, and Katie Westling for always working to ensure that the ship ran smoothly, and to the late Mr. Bill Haas for ensuring that we never left third grade reading scores out of the conversation. May you rest in peace. To my mother, Donna Jones, board member of 15 years, a community activist for as long as I can remember, I salute you tonight. This incredibly smart woman has taught me so much of what I know today. You have not only been a phenomenal mom and grandmother during this time, but my rock. Thank you for choosing SLPS for all 7 of us. And more importantly, thank you for exposing us to some of the best things that life has to offer. For all the times you took us to ward meetings as kids and made us pass out flyers or hold signs to protest with you after school, to the day we did a sit-in at the mayor's office, to the day you not only told me, but you showed me that it was okay to stand up for what I believe in. I appreciate you. Thanks for letting me lead you as your president, for always encouraging me and believing in my dreams. To my incredible daughter, Madison, that's in the back of the room, my greatest joy and the best canvasser ever, thank you. Madison became an involuntary board member over the years and has been in the meetings since before she could walk. On many occasions over the years, Madison has gracefully sacrificed mommy time. For all the days we had to grab dinner on the go, or the nights that you had to sleep in your sleeping bag at meetings, I want to say I appreciate you. To the smartest, most beautiful spirit I know, thank you, Madison. I'm proud of you and I love you. I want you to leave here today knowing that there is a greater work gifted in you by the Most High. Madison, you can do everything you put your mind to. And remember, just like you've told me, I've got your back. To the current board, I say thank you. Thank you for all of your impeccable efforts and the service to the students of St. Louis Public Schools. It's been an honor to meet all of you, and I wish you all the very best in working to make sure that SLPS is the #1 choice for all families in the city of St. Louis. President Dorothy Rhodey Collins, job well done. It's been a ride, but we did it. I really do appreciate your leadership. And you're right, the first time I reached out to you, we hit that campaign trail with our children. That was very meaningful for me. And just working with you in this capacity, and you're right, even though we didn't agree, we still kept our professionalism and kept it moving for the best interests of the kids in the district. So again, thank you. Dr. Adams, it's been a pleasure to work with you. Don't worry, I'm not gonna say anything crazy. Thank you for all of your hard work and dedication to the families of SLPS as well. Although I haven't always agreed, I certainly respect and definitely appreciate you. To our newest board members, I say welcome. I hope and pray that every decision you make will be in the best interest of our students. As you take on your new role, if I could offer any advice, I think that it's important to hold the integrity of this position by sticking to just that, and not allowing outside groups to control the narrative of this board. I hope that you represent us well. To the amazing principals, vice principals, teachers, and staff members, thank you for all of your hard work and dedication to our amazing students. But to the real MVPs, the students, know that you are loved, and I encourage you to do the very best that you can at all times and show the world just how amazing you truly are. In closing, the way I felt 8 years ago is the same way that I feel today. When we organize and strategically plan while working to do the right thing, change happens. Amongst other goals, I came into the board with the mindset of returning power to the people. And we did that by going across this entire city and educating people about what was happening. We literally went from meetings with 1 or 2 people in the audience to a full room. We did letter writing campaigns, and we even had to do a presentation to the state of Missouri to prove that the elected board was ready to serve. Moving forward, I will continue to do what God has placed me here to do, which is to serve, but in a different capacity. Serving on this board has been one of the most valuable experiences that I've ever had. So thank you, St. Louis, for allowing me to fulfill my purpose, my promise of leaving my mark. Thank you.
Dorothy?
Yes.
I just want to say just a couple of things. I'm going to keep mine really, really short. I just want to thank you so much for being there. And it's so important. I want to thank you and Susan both, because when you're setting an example for moms out there, especially. So many women think that because I have the children and they're here, they're there, I don't have an opportunity to get out and make a difference in this world. And so you're setting the example for that. And I'm so proud of both of you all. And you're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure to others as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you've done. And thank you, board members, for being here as well. Thank you all.
So it has been my honor and privilege to serve the children and the employees of this school district over the past 4 years. I'm continually blown away by the hard work that happens within the walls of this school district and the ways in which it persists and perseveres through every obstacle. And while we all recognize that SLPS is the largest provider of education in this city, it is also one of the largest employers. And without the dedication and love of our custodians, secretaries, security officers, teachers, administrators, and central office employees, and superintendent, we would not be successful in the work that we do. So thank you for giving everything that you have to the children of this school district every single day of the year. I've said this many times over the years, but it's so important that I want to repeat it tonight. School board members are the only people elected to exclusively represent the interests of children. And while others, taxpayers, neighborhood residents, developers also benefit from the decisions that we make, The benefit they derive comes from the fact that what is good for children is actually good for everyone. This board and school district must always keep the children of St. Louis Public Schools at the center of its decision-making process. We are ethically, morally, and legally bound to make every decision in the best interest of this school district and the children that it serves. So this is easier said than done, as we know there are forces at play who wish to influence our school district and seek to prioritize special or private interests over the public good. So this tension will not be resolved until the residents of the city of St. Louis engage in an honest and forthright conversation about public education and the purpose we want it to serve in our city. Over the past few months, I've been asked repeatedly, how do you govern and lead through obstacles to which there is no playbook? And my answer is very simple. You find people who you think are smart and that you trust 100%, and you figure it out together. So we can look both regionally and nationally to see the detrimental impacts of special interests and the push for education privatization on traditional public school districts and the children they serve. So St. Louis has a choice to make. We can follow these cities and districts and allow power, money, greed, and the misguided concept of political leverage to win, or we can remain firm and protect our public school district so that it stands for another 150 years. If you believe, like I do, that public education belongs to the people it serves, there has never been a better opportunity to make your opinion known. This board and district have made a nationally unprecedented transition back to governance, and we need your support and your participation to continue forward. So to the board and Dr. Adams and the city of St. Louis, this moment calls for all of us to identify those people who we think are smart and that we trust 100%, who will work together with us out of love and in good faith so that we can continue to strengthen our school district into one that continues to provide an excellent education for all kids all the time. And with that, Susan, would you like to make the motion to adjourn open session and move back into closed session?
I'd like to make a motion that we close open session and move back into closed session. Is there a second?
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. Vowell?
Yes.